Welcome back to Inbox Talk. I'm your host, Liz.
And I'm Evan.
And today we're going to be talking about why some emails land and others don't. There's a lot of different special use cases that we're going to be covering today. So some in particular that you guys might find to be very interesting would be Outlook.
Yep.
There's some specifics there, Gmail, and then just some different like email role types.
Yeah.
So we won't waste any time talking about the overarching things. Let's just dive into the specifics. First one we've got down here is the .edu addresses.
Yeah,
They're
so
a special one.
They are. School emails are kind of weird. So, most students get an email assigned to them when they enroll. And depending on the school, once they graduate or leave, they may keep that email for a set period of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty average, like 2 years.
Yeah.
In some cases, those stay forever if they're like alumni emails or things like that. But also teacher emails can also again, those will generally be in function for as long as they are employed there.
Mm-hmm.
But at some points, they even just changing departments may end up changing what the actual emails are.
Yeah.
So we tend to see a lot of turnover with these particular types of emails. They're valid emails, they're customers, people use them as personal emails and buy stuff with them all the time. But they just shut off much more frequently than, we use Gmail as an example.
Yep.
Those tend to stick around for quite some time. So
even in the e-commerce world, I was going to say I've worked with some customers that they're selling specifically to students based on things that they would need for school. So it would be very common that they'd opt in with that email versus their other one.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's special promotions for those students or those teachers. So yeah, it's definitely not a bad thing to be collecting those. We just want to have a higher awareness around them.
Yeah, so doing additional things like more frequent screening with tools like Zero Bounce, Never Bounce, Kickbox, Bright Verify, those sort of things can help identify emails as they go bad. But also just making sure that you're looking and seeing, if one of those emails goes completely dormant for something like 3 months, they may have just graduated and they don't check that email anymore.
Yep.
So it's something to kind of keep in mind that you want to make sure that you are checking in on them if that's a big portion of your list.
Yeah, definitely good to know. I'd say another thing too is even specific times of the year, we'll see that. So around school time starting, you'll notice that maybe sending is going up or your volume of sends that are going out are going up, and you'll start to maybe hit more of those bounces. So it's good to just have an awareness of who's on your list and what types of emails to be proactive with it instead of waiting for the ding to come back, I guess.
Right.
Perfect. Another one we've got down here is the different role addresses. So examples are like the info @ hello @ contact @ pretty common that we would see those, especially as return addresses being used in businesses, but we'll see a lot of those get opted in as well.
Yeah, we had mentioned this in a previous episode, but things like if you are going to like a trade show, the email that people will often give out is a role address as opposed to like someone's actual inbox. So the concern here is that these are generally kind of like sluice emails where they'll catch a bunch of stuff that's coming into them, but they don't necessarily always have someone checking them. They're great to use, like you said, for like from addresses, but if you start seeing a bunch of those in your list, more than likely those don't actually get checked all that frequently. So again, the concern here is that the list may have ended up in someone's address book and then that got put into a form versus an actual person being behind that. So
or the ownership is changing from person to person. People are manning that at different times of the year as the business changes or something too.
Yeah, so if you're again noticing that you're seeing a lot of those, that may be something that you potentially want to segment out. Or just, again, give that kind of special consideration. Yeah,
I think in customers that I've worked with, it's definitely, depending on the business, there's going to be more of those on some people's lists than in others. So, just keep an awareness of like, your business best. We're never going to tell you what to do on that specifically, but having an awareness and knowing they do need to be, usually handled a little bit differently there.
Yeah.
Perfect. Very similar, well, maybe it's not similar, I guess, but the catch-all addresses. So the example that you've got down here is like johndoe@company.com.
Yeah. So depending on how someone sets up their email for their company, you can have it set that if you email any random address, that email will still go somewhere. Generally, it's a kind of a generic inbox. So we used, johndoe@company.net. If there isn't an actual person named John Doe working there, that email could still go through and go somewhere so someone could potentially view it. But depending on how many of those emails are coming through, there would be hundreds a day. And so it doesn't really get looked through all that frequently. Some tools can identify emails as catch-all email addresses, so they'll know there isn't a explicit record there.
Okay.
But it'll still work if you send an email.
Okay.
And in some cases, again, like if people are purchasing and using that email, they may be a viable person. Someone may be actually checking those, but they're worth kind of that additional, eyebrow raise. You're like, I don't know.
Yeah, makes total sense. And then as far as taking action on those, would it be something that, like, is there special tools out there for it, or it's just kind of having that awareness of your engagement level with certain emails?
Yeah, a lot of those verification tools that I mentioned.
Okay.
So again, like the zero bounce, never bounce, kickbox, all that sort of stuff. Those can identify those, but again, those are paid services, and they're not necessarily something through us. So if it's valid and you can send to it, we'll let you send to it.
Yep.
But it's a matter of you having the knowledge of being like, is this person actually interacting? Are they buying from you? Is it kind of a junk email that's just picking up stuff?
So corporate emails, they're a little bit different. I know, speaking for myself, I use my work email and my personal email a little bit interchangeably when I'm subscribing to hear from companies. What do people need to know about how those are handled a bit differently?
Yeah, so corporate emails are generally a little bit more locked down than like a free or like a personal email provider, whether that be through like additional firewall software that they have set up for security, or even just the like inbox tool that they're using to view the emails. This is where Outlook comes up relatively frequently because a lot of companies use Outlook. Even if they're using a Gmail address, you can look at those emails through Outlook.
Interesting.
And so that's going to have like the additional kind of built-in Microsoft security, which is good or bad depending on how you're looking at it.
More stringent, we'll say.
Yeah, exactly. So again, with those kind of corporate emails, you may have issues that crop up where you yourself as a company don't get your own emails as frequently because they end up in spam. This may be because you're getting 100 emails a month to 100 email addresses inside your company. So it may start looking at those being like, I don't know. But anybody that you're emailing that's brand new, those will land just fine. Obviously, it's always good to do testing with that, but there are a little bit more options in terms of if you have access to those things, or if you email someone's postmaster, it's saying like, hey, cool, we have reports that these emails aren't coming through. Is there anything that we can do to kind of whitelist them, which we've talked about before?
Okay.
That can get a little bit more hairy. So it's hard to segment based off of that because everybody's individual company is going to be kind of its own thing.
Their own domains.
But if you ever have any questions about that coming up, where it's like, hey, I have someone who's not getting my emails, here's their email address, it's so-and-so@company.com. Reach out to us. We can generally kind of help you navigate that.
Cool. Yeah, it's not something that I hear a ton from customers, but I think, it's definitely a case-by-case basis, depending on just how strict their own internal, I'll say firewalls, I don't know if that's the right thing.
Yeah, it is, and it's difficult because there's very little that you yourself can do about it as someone who's trying to email them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Makes it for a good conversation for us to have with people individually, too.
Exactly.
So you mentioned in there that Outlook is something that comes up quite a bit. This is definitely a question that I can speak from my team, our support team. We're getting questions on that quite a bit. What do people need to know about Outlook and how things are a little bit different in there?
Yeah, a lot of it's dependent on what version of Outlook they're actually running. So again, companies, they'll buy a software license and try and stick with it until it dies, which means they may be running, software that's more than 10 years old in some cases. So the older versions of Outlook specifically can be difficult to work with. Microsoft does a really good job about letting people know, hey, we're retiring this software, we're no longer supporting it, we're no longer doing security updates for it. But that doesn't change other software from continuing to change. And so what can happen is there's a new, template of email that comes out that Outlook 2006 is going to flag as hard as possible as spam when it's just a completely legitimate email. And it's very difficult to kind of work with those individual situations because you as a person could not get this email, whereas everybody else on my list does. And it's just due to the email client that you're using to actually look at that email. Yeah.
When I have these conversations, generally it's if somebody's testing out and they're starting to send their own emails, they're sending it to their internal corporate ones. Majority of people on their list, again, every business is a little bit different, but majority of the time people are using their own personal addresses to hear from e-commerce brands. But if it is something that we have, you're doing some testing or you have a majority of your list that is in Outlook, is there anything that the customers can do or that the brand can do to alleviate that, or any kind of just generalized tips and tricks there?
Yeah, it depends on how kind of deep down the rabbit hole you want to go. You can actually set up Outlook specific templates, you're basically building an email within an email to have it render completely differently depending on which program is actually looking at it. Yeah. That's like the very advanced solution and not generally something that we recommend. Again, it's maybe impacting a certain portion of your list, but for most people, it should be okay. If that's something that though, that like you're getting reports from a lot of people that Outlook is the primary thing that people are opening your emails on, then we have an option to do that in our text builder where you can put in kind of your own styling, build your own template, all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Again, there are tools out there that will let you kind of do testing to a variety of platforms. Unfortunately, most of them aren't free. But if you have access to, your personal Gmail, your work Outlook, a friend who's got a Hotmail,
you can do some internal testing.
Yeah. There isn't a end all be all solution for that. A lot of times it's just you have to get an email inside an inbox and take a look at it.
Yeah. One thing I'd say, just to kind of help alleviate any questions that you might have too, is again, majority of our customers and the brands that we're working with don't have a large customer base that are using Outlook.
Yeah.
So you're right. There are going to be options out there if you do want to customize per version of Outlook. Definitely something that you can do. I wouldn't say that it's something that all of our customers need to hire a developer, get these custom coded by any means. There's a lot that can be done just within our actual visual builder or our text builder from a one size fits all perspective. You're going to be covering a good majority of your customer base if you get that tuned in to send out properly to those places.
Yeah, the large majority of emails that are going out are to Gmail addresses, which is the next thing that we're going to talk about.
Perfect. All right. Well, great segue there. What do we need to know about Gmail?
Oh, Gmail. Gmail is its own beast. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't ever get back out of Gmail in that if you're having issues with a lot of people reporting your emails as spam or you're having emails bounce and things like that, Gmail doesn't report any of that externally. They kind of have their own closed off ecosystem because they want their security to be as bulletproof as possible.
And again, it's not to harm anybody's business. It's from a protection perspective. So it's all done with good intentions.
Yeah, very much so. Very similar to, spam traps being actually a good thing for you.
Yeah.
It just makes trying to do what's right by Gmail a little bit more difficult because they don't give you as much information as other providers do. One of the things that you can set up and that we recommend setting up if you're having any issues with Gmail is Google Postmaster Tools. This is a free tool. Gmail provides it, and what it'll let you do is it'll start reporting information on emails that you're sending into Google inboxes. So it's nice because it'll give you spam report information. It'll give you a domain reputation rating. It'll let you know how you're doing on the IP addresses that you're sending from. The caveat to that is that they don't give you a score as a number. They break it down as being good, medium, low, or bad.
Yep.
And those are all color coded. So you kind of
easy to read, but it's not a true score like what you would be used to seeing maybe if you're looking into deliverability as a whole.
Right. So in most cases, if you're in the medium kind of bracket, you'll be just fine. Lower than that, you start to see, emails starting to get delayed or deferred because they're wanting to test them out before they actually land in inboxes and things like that. But the medium bracket is really wide.
Okay.
So you in a lot of cases, you won't ever get to the good bracket, and that's okay. But it's something that you definitely want to start monitoring if it's something that you notice that a lot of your emails are going into Gmail.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect segue into Gmail. So what do we need to know about Gmail? It's a complex thing.
Yeah. Gmail is kind of its own little environment that there's such a big player in the email industry that they warrant their own consideration just because, it's 50% of the emails that are getting sent out or more.
Yeah.
So,
and good to be educated on to know how to handle it best.
For sure. There's a lot of data that we can get from other email providers or inbox providers that it's just a little bit more complicated when it comes to Gmail. So things like, even email opens, bounces, spam complaints, none of that gets reported externally. So even stuff like opens, you have to rely on the tracking pixel as opposed to other inbox providers actually reporting those opens back to whatever tracking system that you're using. So with spam complaints and things like that, the only way to kind of see those inside of Gmail is to use their free tool, Google Postmaster Tools. You are required to have a custom sending domain set up if you're going to also use Postmaster Tools. So if you're seeing issues with inbox placement or emails going to spam, that's one of the first things that you're going to want to set up.
Yep.
It is not retroactive, so as soon as you actually finish setup and verify the domain with Google, that's when it starts tracking. So the sooner the better. It lets you kind of be ahead of things as opposed to just kind of seeing the symptoms and not having the actual diagnosis. So
it's pretty common when people get that sending domain set up, they start tracking in the Postmaster Tools. What should they be looking out for? What brands want to know when they're logging in and they're seeing some dashboards in the Postmaster?
Yeah, the two big ones that you're going to want to look at, you can see individual spam reports inside of Google. Again, they're not going to give you the email address that it actually was issued from, but it'll give you just kind of like a graph over time. Again, this is like the literal only way that you can see that data, which is kind of unfortunate, but it's good to keep track of. The other thing that can impact whether or not your emails are going to land in the inbox is just your overall reputation. So they don't give you a numerical score, which can be a little bit tricky. They break it down into 4 categories. So you're either good, which is green, medium, which is yellow, low, which is orange, and bad, which is red. Because they don't give you like an aggregate score, there's no way to tell, if you're in medium and you want to get to good, you have no idea how close you are. You just kind of have to keep doing the good practices in order to make sure that those things are
trending in that right direction.
Exactly.
But you don't know directionally necessarily if you're in that medium range, which it's a pretty big range.
Yeah, most folks live in that kind of medium area, and if you're solidly sitting there, you generally won't have any issues getting emails into inboxes. If people are subscribing and you're like routinely getting rid of people that aren't interacting, it's just going to routinely go to people's inboxes. You see companies like food delivery ones where they'll routinely order or send out coupons.
Oh yeah.
As long as you're opening them, they send out a ton of emails, but they're still generally going to land in your inbox. So that's the best example that I can think of.
Okay. So, but I think the big thing to point out is if you're not in the good category, it's okay. Medium is generally pretty, I hate to say it's good, but it's not a bad place to be, and that's where a lot of folks would live.
Yeah, good is kind of like you're trying to aspire to be kind of there. It's just difficult to tell because if we were to say good is 95 and above and medium is 50 plus, there's a huge kind
gap
of
there.
Yeah,
Yep. Okay.
There's a lot of space.
So got a good handle on Postmaster. If there is anything glaring, definitely something that you'd want to take action on, but the medium and good, you're in a good spot.
Yep.
There is one other piece that you'd want to take into consideration for Gmail, so the individual inbox behavior.
Yeah, so the best way is to kind of give an example of this. So let's say that you and I are both subscribed to a company. I've been subscribed to them for a year, and so I've gotten maybe 100 emails from them over the course of this year. And you're a brand new subscriber, you're just getting your first email today.
Yep.
You may get that email in your inbox, and I won't. So if I haven't opened any of those emails over the year, more than likely Gmail's going to have learned that I'm just not interested.
Yep.
And so it's going to put them into promotions or spam and not put them in the priority inbox.
It's not that they won't get them. They're just not going to be landing in that true inbox for Gmail. They'll be on a separate tab.
Correct. The alternative can also be true, which is the confusing part. So let's say, again, I've gotten 100 emails from them. You're getting your first one.
Yep.
Your email may go to spam, but if I've opened all 100 emails that I've gotten from them, Gmail knows that I care about this brand and really want to see it. So that is where you can start to see discrepancies. Normally, if you test out an email with a brand new inbox and it lands, you're pretty okay. That's going to mean that your new subscribers and your new customers are getting what they're requesting, or they're getting their status updates and things like that.
Yep.
Whereas people who've been with you for a long time, if they become disengaged, they're going to start kind of falling off.
Yep.
It doesn't necessarily mean that there's a problem with your emails. It's just the Gmail algorithm kind of learning that individual person's preferences.
Person to person.
Right.
Just keep that in mind, that it's not necessarily overarching to everybody.
Yeah.
I think that's a common question that we get all the time.
It is, and it's frustrating because there's really nothing you can do about it aside from getting those people to open their emails, which, you can't really do.
Yep. I think one other question that I've gotten sometimes is if enough people move the email manually and they do the click and drag over from the promotions to the inbox, does that have any effect on the mass quantities of people on the list? Again, it's just that individual side, right?
Correct.
Yep. So again, good to know. Harder to control because there's just not much visibility into it. But I think it's important to at least understand what you should know and shouldn't know about Gmail, since it is such a good thing or big thing within the email space.
Yeah, and it's very unique.
Yeah, perfect. So we've covered a lot of specific use cases and different instances that it's important to know about. If you do have any other ones that you specifically would like us to review, please let us know. We're happy to talk about it down the road. Thanks for joining us today.